October 9th, 2020. David Bedin, behind the scene with David Bedin in my sukkah, in my tabernacle, which is something that the Jewish people observe during this period of time after Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, after the New Year. We celebrate the nature, and we sit in huts in front of our homes and live a kind of a different experience. But the reality of what's happening here in Israel is what I'd like to touch on today. The deal with the United Arab Emirates is starting to emerge in terms of all its details. 200 Israeli corporations now opening up their business in the United Arab Emirates. Last week, Israel's business magazine called Globes had 54 pages devoted to the hundreds of Israelis who are now going to be doing business with the United Arab Emirates. Very important. Now, what happened this week was rather dramatic. The spokesman, actually the foreign minister of the United Arab Emirates flew to Berlin together with the foreign minister of Israel, and the two of them issued a joint statement. And where did they issue a joint statement? At the Berlin Museum, in memory of the 6 million Jews that Nazi Germany had wiped out in World War II. Both of them, the foreign minister of Israel and the foreign minister of the United Arab Emirates, issued a joint statement, beginning with "never again," expressing their mutual understanding that never again will there be a force that will advocate genocide of the Jewish people. However, on the same day that the United Arab Emirates and the Israeli government issued such a statement in Berlin, the United Arab Emirates was praised by the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, also known as UNRWA, for allocating $50 million as the largest contributor to UNRWA in the Arab world, saying that they should be praised for preserving the school system of UNRWA, which teaches the subject of mass murder of the Jews as a subject, as a focus of their education. People who don't believe it can go onto our website, which is israelbehindthenews.com, which is translated now into 6 languages, and you'll see there the curriculum of what the children there are learning, and which is not only being supported by, in this case, United Arab Emirates, but by 67 nations around the world. We have a link there to the nations that are supporting it. Now, this contrast between the statement of never again and the statement of total support for the education system is the tension which goes into the arrangement between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. During this coming week, on October 12th and on October 13th, there will be a 2-day session of the Israeli government in which they will decide whether or not to ratify the accord. It's very clear to me that it's going to be ratified. But on October 14th, there will be 13th or 14th, it hasn't been decided yet, there will be a discussion at the United Nations General Assembly, concerning the future of UNRWA. And the Israel delegation at that session will present the school books, which the children are learning, including a school book that features terrorists who have murdered Jews as role models, in which children are encouraged to sing songs about the extermination of the Jews. And the hundreds of pages of the curriculum, which we have translated, which we have examined, will be shown at the United Nations on that time. That's never happened before, that it's been discussed actually in the General Assembly. And the context of the UNRWA request for continued support will be on the agenda. And I'm thinking of the agenda of the United Nations. I'm thinking of the agenda of the Jewish people when I sit in a sukkah, when I sit in this tabernacle, which represents the future of the Jewish people in a modest kind of a way, where people, again, go out of their homes and live in a hut that represents the exodus of Egypt and how God protected the Jewish people when they were leaving Egypt. So sometimes in Israel we think of the Israeli army protecting us, and sometimes we think of God protecting us. Depends on, in a sense, the mood of the people. But the mood of the people during Sukkot, during the Feast of the Tabernacles, is very clearly a theological one, whether the people have to be Orthodox Jews or not Orthodox Jews, observant Jews, not observant Jews, or even some of the people who come and are not Jewish and come to Israel and appreciate the fact that perhaps God has given a blessing to the Jewish people to continue. So what happens this week at the Israeli government, what happens this week at the United Nations, will be foremost in our minds as we prepare for the not only the end of Sukkot, but what we will call Simchat Torah, the celebration of the Torah, which occurs this week. And then next week, we'll decide we'll discuss what was in the Israeli government this week and what was at the United Nations. So stay tuned. Meanwhile, take a look at our website. We have two websites, IsraelBehindTheNews.com, and the other one is UNRWA Monitor, UNRWA-Monitor.com, where you can see a gathering of all of the data that we've gathered on the subject of UNRWA over the last 33 years. This is David Bedein reporting, Behind the Scene with David Bedein. Thank you for watching.